You watched them do it. Take credit for work they never did. Smile at the right people. Leave damage they never acknowledged. And then get promoted. You're not imagining it. You're not being cynical. There is a pattern, and it runs deeper than any single bad manager. This episode is about why the most toxic people in your organization keep rising and what you can do about it. We tend to think about dark triad behavior as something that happens despite the system, an unfortunate exception, someone who slipped through. But here is what 7 episodes of this series have been building toward. The observation that changes how you read every performance review, every promotion decision, every C-suite hire you will ever witness. Organizations do not merely tolerate dark triad traits. In most corporate structures, the criteria used to evaluate and promote people are functionally indistinguishable from a checklist of dark triad behaviors. Think about what most performance reviews actually reward: confidence, assertiveness, strategic thinking, the ability to influence others, decisiveness under pressure, comfort with risk. These are the words on the rubric. They are also, by any clinical definition, descriptions of narcissistic self-regard, Machiavellian social calculation, and psychopathic risk tolerance. Psychologist Clive Boddy, who has studied what he calls corporate psychopaths for over 2 decades, found that toxic leaders do not succeed in spite of organizational culture. They succeed because of it. The structures built to identify high performers reliably surface the same cluster of traits the dark triad has in abundance. Paul Babiak and Robert Hare, in their landmark study of corporate environments, estimated that psychopathy runs at approximately 4% among senior corporate professionals, compared to roughly 1% in the general population. 4 times the rate. Not random, selected. That is not a bug in the system. That is the system working exactly as designed. It starts with something that looks like confidence. The narcissist walks into a new organization and immediately begins performing the version of themselves that reads as leadership. Eye contact held a beat too long. Opinions delivered with a certainty that no one has yet earned. Stories that always end with the narrator winning. In the first 90 days, this creates an impression. Senior stakeholders see someone with presence, someone who projects belief in themselves, someone promotable. What they are not seeing yet, every interaction is being audited. Every person in the room is being assessed for usefulness. Those with access, budget, or influence are being cultivated. Those without are being disregarded. Sometimes visibly enough that people notice, but never visibly enough to create a formal complaint. The tactics on the ground look like this. In a Slack thread, they respond to their own work before anyone else can, framing the narrative before the room has a chance to form an opinion. In a meeting, they interrupt by restating what the previous speaker said, adding one word and receiving the credit. In a performance review conversation, they present a single successful quarter as the story of the year and let the manager's confirmation bias do the rest. Manfred Ketz de Vries, a leadership psychologist at INSEAD, who has spent decades studying what he calls the dark side of organizational behavior, observed that narcissistic leaders generate a powerful first impression precisely because organizations are structured around short evaluation cycles. Quarterly reviews, annual cycles. The slow erosion that narcissism causes, the talent that quietly exits, the collaboration that quietly stops, does not show up on any dashboard that matters. Here is the line no one says aloud. The narcissist is not gaming the system. They are optimizing for the metrics the system actually tracks, and the system has never been updated to track what they destroy. Nobody warns you about the patient ones. The Machiavellian in your organization is not the loudest person in the room. They are, frequently, not even the most visible. They are the person who already knew what was going to happen in the meeting before the meeting started, because they spent the preceding week having one-on-one conversations with every decision maker in the room. This is how they operate, not through dominance, through architecture. Picture this: a cross-functional project with 6 stakeholders. One of them never pushes hard in group settings, never publicly disagrees. They ask questions, they take notes. After every meeting, They send a brief follow-up to 2 or 3 specific individuals, always the ones with the most political capital, offering a small, useful observation. Over 6 months, they have constructed a network of people who think of them as a trusted confidant. None of those people knows that every other person on the project receives the same treatment. None of them knows the Machiavellian has been positioning themselves for the project lead role since month 1. The manipulation is not in the lie. The manipulation is in the architecture, the deliberate sequencing of relationships, information, and timing. If you have ever been told you are too sensitive about someone who seemed perfectly reasonable to everyone else, this is frequently why. You were not too sensitive. You were the one person who saw the architecture from the wrong angle. Here is the part that breaks most people's intuition about what danger looks like at work. The corporate psychopath does not look erratic. They look calm. Specifically, they look calm in situations where being calm is impressive, a crisis, a conflict, a confrontation, because they are not suppressing fear or distress. They are simply not experiencing it. Babiak and Hare documented this pattern extensively in Snakes and Suits, their study of psychopathic behavior in corporate environments. The psychopath in the boardroom presents as decisive because they genuinely do not experience the emotional friction that makes decisions hard for everyone else. They make the call no one else will make. They end the contract, cut the team, kill the project. And leadership reads this as strength. The cost is invisible and deferred. The people who were cut too quickly, without the process that would have surfaced important information. The project that was killed before anyone understood why it was struggling. The decisions look clean. The damage appears later, on someone else's watch. On the ground, the psychopathic colleague presents as someone everyone simultaneously admires and is slightly afraid of. They remember what you said in a moment of vulnerability, and they do not use it immediately. They file it. You are not sure they would ever use it, but the uncertainty is enough. You adjust your behavior around them without being fully aware you are doing it. You don't raise the concern in the meeting. You don't push back on the timeline. You don't apply for the role you wanted, because something told you the field was already decided. That feeling was information. It was not anxiety. It was pattern recognition. Understanding this is not the same as being helpless inside it. Here is what protective intelligence looks like in practice. First, document outcomes, not impressions. Dark Triad individuals are extremely skilled at managing impressions. They are far less skilled at managing paper trails. If you are working with someone who takes credit, misrepresents timelines, or moves information without attribution, the single most powerful thing you can do is create a time-stamped record of your own contributions. Not to build a case, to build clarity, for yourself, for your manager, for any future moment when the record matters. Email confirmations of verbal agreements, brief follow-up notes after key conversations. This is not paranoia. This is how high-functioning professionals protect their work in any environment. Second, map the architecture, not the surface. In any organization where you suspect Machiavellian dynamics, the question to ask is not who is likable. The question is who is talking to whom, about what, and in what sequence. Observe alliances. Notice who gets credit in rooms they were not in. Understand the political structure before you assume the formal hierarchy reflects how decisions actually get made. Third, find your lateral allies. The defended professional in a dark triad environment does not survive through confrontation. They survive through distributed trust, colleagues across levels and departments who can independently verify your work, your contributions, your character. One toxic colleague cannot undermine you across a wide network. They can only undermine you in the rooms where you have no other witnesses. You're allowed to be good at your job and strategic about protecting it. Those two things are not in conflict. If setting a boundary could put your role or safety at risk, your safety comes first, before any tactic in this video. A professional in your area can help you think through a safe path forward. In 8 episodes, we have mapped the dark triad from its clinical origins to the specific tactics it runs in the room where you work. You now understand why these patterns exist, how they target, and how to defend against them with precision rather than paranoia. But there is one type we have not yet discussed. one that operates on a completely different principle from everything in this series. The grandiose narcissist makes themselves large. The Machiavellian makes themselves useful. The psychopath makes themselves calm. The covert narcissist makes themselves small, tired, hurt. They never look dangerous. They look like the person who needs protecting. And that is exactly what makes them the most difficult to see, and in some ways, the most difficult to leave. That is next. The system selects for this. That is no longer a surprise to you. What you do with that knowledge, that is the only thing that was ever in your hands.